Before I give my perspective on that, I graduated out of IIM in 1982. And at that time, I said, I don't want to work for a large company, and I don't want to work in computing, because I just didn't enjoy programming at all. So one of that got fulfilled. I joined what was then a startup, which was NIIT, which was in the business of education, and which was in computers. And it took me 8 years to realize that I truly was wedded to computing. So almost right from my beginning, and I'm in the middle of my 4th decade in the computing industry. And all of that, strangely, except for NIIT, even that had a fair amount of consulting work, was in the system integration business. So when I look back and I see what's transpired, I can take this page out and make it in the mid-90s, and it would have read employability in the internet age. I could have taken it in late 80s and it would have said internet in the client-server age. I could have taken it to early 80s and it would have said employability in the personal computing age. So I've seen the personal computing leading to client-server, to internet, and now it's mobile, and now it's digital. And I'm sure as the waves hit the shores of the ocean, it'll be XYZ, 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 XYZ. The variables being filled with a different name every 5 to 10 to 15 years. It's only a matter of how much is the duration. So fundamentally, that label doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter to me when I look at a fresh person from the college. It's a material convenience that if the person is already trained in a particular area, that it decreases our in-house training by a few more weeks. But after 5 years, and I just got off a meeting with 2 kids, I still call them kids, I got my gray hairs, and they're ex-IIT, 5 years, smart guys, and they say, look, I've been doing maintenance work, I'm bored. And they did some fairly interesting work in the data warehousing, and they want to do more work. And I promised them that they will be doing much more serious cutting edge work than what there is today. In November, I was in Pondy University, and there were students there. I was there as a panel on digital, because I had the digital practice at Virtusa, which is a 2,500 people team with the merger with Polaris. It's a fairly good size. So I get called into, whether anybody knows whether I know digital or not, because of my title, I get called into all these digital things. Okay, and clearly, I did not know digital 40 years back, and I have no idea what it's going to look 40 years from now. And yet, they call me and ask me to say, what is the role of, how do you handle, how will you be creative in the digital age? Okay, only the adjective, the adverbs change, the digital always remains in some way, shape or form. So this was in November, and I had a call this afternoon prior to this where we had a senior person who was a program manager for a fairly substantial cutting edge digital project for a cutting edge telco in the world. And the discussion there was, how could you be more energized? How could you build long-term relationship with your customers? And how do you improve your executive presence in this project, which is a hardcore digital project? So I would like to share with you my perspective of what is truly employability. How a person gets employed in the immediate future of getting into a particular, just as soon as they graduate out of the college, which to you, most of you, is of importance because you want to make sure that the first step is a good step and they get employed very quickly. From a long-term perspective, the employability of theirs through the next 3 to 4 decades that they will work is of critical importance to us in the industry. Because if somebody comes in and then can't pick up stuff, it's a difficult issue. The general belief that I had held for a long time, is adaptability, how quickly you can understand. And generally, when I address most of the college graduates, we end up doing, because I think in the last few decades I've had at least a couple of thousand students that I've addressed who have been fresh out of college and are now in the workforce. The first thing I tell them are the basics. I say, please dress well, please talk well, and then what you talk becomes important. Okay? And this I would call as a basic hygiene. I also tell them that whatever you have been so far is actually irrelevant. Whether you came from a poor background, whether you came from middle class, lower middle class, upper middle class, wealthy class, you came from the north, the south, the Bengal or Kerala, it's irrelevant to us. What's important is what you are today and what you're going to be. And it takes a while for them to actually digest that fact. Because after they get in, and more so after a couple of years, where they came from, what they did in the past is irrelevant. And it was driven into me much earlier because I had this nice, good background. I had NIT Trichy, I had IIM Ahmedabad, which is about as good a label as you could have. And then I went to Australia about 5-6 years into my career. And I said, I'm from IIM Ahmedabad, and say, what is that? So it was driven into me. I mean, then I went into California and they knew nothing. I mean, in fact, when I told them they were from Australia, they didn't know whether there are kangaroos jumping on the street or there are business. So it has been driven into me multiple times. And even when I came back to India about 11 years back, they said, well, you worked in America and Silicon Valley. I don't think you can actually handle people. So they didn't want to give me any large team. They gave me a small team and they said, here's 25 people team and you can run it. And at that time I had about 25 years of experience. I tried to share that with the students, and essentially that's what I'm sharing with you. If there is some way in which you could educate them that while what they learn in the college is extremely important, how they look at the rest of the life is far more important. Because once they're out of the college and out there for 2 years, and we all know this, everything they've done in the past is actually irrelevant. It's useful to have that degree in the back and that you came from a reputed institution. But as the years pass by, what they have done and what they have done even in the recent past is irrelevant. But many people fail to grasp that. Many people take a long time to understand that. If there is any way in which this could be communicated to the student community, it will do them a whole lot of good. They will probably value that education as the most valuable that they ever got out of an educational institution. And we in the industry would value that the most. Because their ability to let go of everything in the past, be it technology, be it personal background or personal habits, and their willingness to remold themselves to be a different person with different capabilities for a different tomorrow is far more valuable and of greater value to us in the industry. It will be of greater value to them than anything else. And it takes, at least it took me a couple of decades to figure that out. It didn't come naturally because I had gotten booted around the world by saying, I don't know what you did in the past, but can you do this now? It is driven into me over time. So the question comes to is what is truly important that I see after all these years that can genuinely be of value to students from your educational institutions. I know that the focus is significantly on the engineering, on their logical and critical skills, their ability to solve the problems, and we all know that they do that with various levels of capability. Some of that, the genetics, some of them because of their diligence. And there's very little that one could change because attitudes get set fairly firmly by the time they get to college. How smart they are, actually you know that much earlier than even college. How diligent they are is fairly apparent at least midway through the college years. They might change slightly after work when they get to work, but primarily how good they are capability-wise, how diligent they are, and what attitude they have. Very little control even they have. I have found that, and this I shared, somebody asked me again at Pondy University, and this is again asked, and in a university in Boston where my son is studying. I said, what is a value? And I said, what is a value is truly to be fundamentally creative. And I don't mean creative as in paintings and photography and stuff like that, which is one form of creative expression. But fundamentally at a personal level, are they creative? You cannot create unless there is peace. And you cannot create something, you cannot grow something, you cannot do something unless there is peace in the land. You can't grow, you can't do craft, you can't do technology in a war-torn place. It's very similar to that. You cannot be creative unless there is, you cannot be of creative mind unless there is peace in the mind. It is of paramount importance that somebody, to be creative, to reinvent themselves and do something in an area. And I will, before I get into the philosophy of it or the principle of it, this afternoon the discussion with the senior program manager of a cutting-edge digital project was for him to build an executive presence, for him to build confidence and relationship. And a project was taken as an exercise for that person to build those skills. And he is amongst what we call as a gold candidate. He is among the elite of the elite within Virtusa, that we are looking to get that person to a higher stage. And my suggestion to him, and all these can only be suggestions, was if you're going to be learning how to have your executive presence in a major project, that is equivalent to going and playing a square cut in the middle of a test cricket in Wankhede Stadium or in Melbourne Cricket Ground. You cannot execute your best in a test arena unless you have practiced it enough times in your nets or in the nets. And you cannot do it in the nets unless you have had time to reflect on what and how you need to do it in your mind or in the quietness of your mind. The same thing goes for everything in the computing world, be it digital or be it A, B, C, D, E, be it an Internet of Things or Things of Internet or whatever the name be 2 decades from now. I have no idea what it will be 4 decades from now. I had no idea that I would see a picture like this 4 decades back. I have no idea what it would be even 3 decades ahead. But I can say definitely that if we can help the students of today who hold our future, fundamentally these are the people who are going to give us our future and build their own. If we can help them take a step back from knowing the data warehousing and Pegasus systems and SharePoint and AngularJS, all those skills, if you can help them take a step back from that and say, hey, if you're going to be a great technology person or if you're going to be a great marketing person, take a step back from what you're immediately doing and practice, and before practice, reflect on what you're doing. So find that space in your mind, find that space in your heart where you can quietly reflect on what you are, what you want to be, and go forth with that energy. Because if that is not there, it doesn't matter what else they do, they will come to an issue, they'll come to a stagnant place, and they will struggle continuously. And it becomes even more important in the next 4 decades than in the 4 decades that I have left behind, primarily because the world is changing so rapidly and things are so fast that what was considered UI now, it's AngularJS, what was called mobile yesterday, what is called mobile is called now digital, what is digital today, tomorrow is called Internet of Things. It just, by the time you get the grasp of the jargon, it's all gone. So if there is any way in which you could help your students get back to what is fundamentally themselves, which is fundamentally say, hey, if you're going to be successful, you need to be adaptable. You need to be adaptable. For that, you have to be creative. In order to be creative, unless you go back within yourself and reflect on what is creative to you, what is important to you, and how you can tackle a situation that is externally manifesting, they will continue to struggle. I'm quite happy to come in and give this lecture in any college, anywhere you want. I can give more examples to this, but I'm mindful of the time. But I have personally learned And I share this with my team, and these are people with 2 decades and 3 decades and a decade of experience, and it resonating even more loudly than what it used to. That it is important for somebody to take stock of what they are on a periodic and regular basis and cultivate a habit of taking stock of what they are, how the situation outside is affecting them at the personal level. Figure out a solution there in your internal calm space and go forth and make the change outside. Because if they're not able to do that, they will become dysfunctional, they'll become stagnant, they'll run into problems with their peers, their bosses, their juniors, so on and so forth. So to me, if I have to conclude, employability is a very critical issue because otherwise, too many other things kick in. So employability, if we are to be, it doesn't even matter whether it's in digital age, whether it's in computing, non-computing, manufacturing. Almost everything is changing. I met a friend from Ford, fairly high position, and he says the whole auto industry is in for a revolution in the next 5 years. And I can see that we are on the cusp of a revolution in the IT space fairly significantly in the coming decade. It becomes even more important within educational institutions that you send forth your students with a grasp of not just the technology, not just the skills related to technology, but how they can deal with the varying and changing world that they are going to see over the next 3 to 4 decades. Thank you.